the students might be listening to the new version of a particular song, like Luke Combs' Fast Car versus Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
That was my generation. So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Unleashed Learning Radio for our podcast listeners. Hello, podcast listeners. Now, if you want to make learning stick for everyone, and we mean everyone, music is such a gift for helping to make this happen. Now, if you've worked with us, you know that it can help lower the guard, it can help create a sense of belonging, and it can even help ways you connect students to the content. Now, to help you and your school think about ways to use music, we've got Manu Bobo today. She's the author of Hip Hop and Hymns, and she's also a cultural journalist on ABC News who's passionate about music. You're about to see why. She's here to share with you how music can unleash learning for all students and innovative ways you can use music to make learning stick for everyone. Here we go. So, Manu, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV.
Hello, William. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I am so excited about this interview because I think a lot of educators and leaders, I think what you do and talk about and you're passionate about connects to unleashed learning in these weird ways. And I think you're going to inspire us to think about our classrooms and the ways to make learning stick. So thank you for being here and trusting me with this process. So,
of course.
So, as we talked about earlier, what we do at Unleashed Learning is we really work with good schools working to become great schools. And what they do is they embed the Unleashed Learning system in place to ensure learning sticks for everyone. And part of that work is they really understand how to set up the classroom. There's a structure to the classroom setup. Now, music plays a really important role in that. And sometimes educators are like, well, we can do that, but sometimes we need some more inspiration to think about music. And with your background, I thought you could help us.
I will do my very best.
Okay. So let's jump into it. And now you work as a pop cultural journalist, which I think might be the coolest thing in the world for the ABC. And so I think you probably had the coolest job in the world. And I know a lot of that work connects to music. And I know you're passionate about music. So I wanted to ask you, I've written about it, you give talks about this. What would you want teachers and school leaders to know or think about when it comes to music, especially for students?
Well, the first thing that I would want school teachers and leaders to think about is the fact that students are quite often using music to self-medicate. And I'll talk about what I mean by that in a minute. A lot of students are deeply affected by what they're hearing in certain songs. Students sometimes find what they're listening to very confusing. And simultaneously, they can find great joy and comfort and a sense of belonging in music and in the artists they're listening to. Now, how do I know this, William? How
do you know that?
I know this because I was once a student and I experienced all of the above. So I've written about it actually in Hip Hop and Hymns. I talk about just how confusing my relationship was with hip hop music and how I was a teenage girl listening to hip hop music in the 1990s. And a lot of what I was hearing was my favorite rappers rapping about bitches and hoes. And as a teenage girl, I found that very confusing. And I was conflicted because I loved this music so much. I fell in love with hip hop. And in some ways, I was very connected to the music I was listening to the artists I was listening to. I felt a sense of belonging because these were Black artists I was listening to. And as a Black girl growing up in a regional country town, there weren't many people who looked like me. So this music was really important in that sense of belonging. But it also affected me in so many ways negatively. And so I think teachers need to be conscious of this, that they will have students in their classroom who have this relationship with music that's both enjoyable and fun and exciting, but it can also be quite triggering and also can be harmful in some ways.
It makes, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to say what I'm hearing you talk about is you're a Black woman in Australia in a regional town. And music was really important on so many levels. And there's a conflict between the sense of community and belonging, but sometimes what was being talked about or sung about. And it makes me think about a lot about, we talk a lot at Unleashed Learning is identities always matter. They always connect to power. And what is in the classroom? What are the materials? What are the resources? Does it look like our students? So music can do that, but it can also conflict with that if we're not mindful of how we're using it. Am I saying that correctly?
Absolutely. I think you're saying that absolutely correctly.
I think it's a really important piece about not disconnect, the conflict of it. I think it's really important. So the next question I've got here is really about at Unleashed Learning. A lot of teachers will learn how to use music to lower the guard. So as people are walking the room, to create positive emotions, to create a sense of belonging. And my question to you about that is, can you tell us the kinds of music now this is a big question, right? But from your vantage point, what kinds of music should we think about using if we have diverse backgrounds and different people in our classrooms to create a sense of belonging or lower the guards or make people feel welcome as they walk in the room? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. So if I was a teacher in a classroom right now, I would want to be finding out what the students are listening to. And how do you find that out? Ask them. Ask them the question. Yeah. Find out what they're listening to. There's no better way than just asking them. And that, to me, is how you decide what music to select to play in classrooms. And most tracks, if they're hits, have radio edits, so you don't have to worry too much about the swear words and stuff like that. Yeah. But, you could also check out things like TikTok trending, which you can find on the iHeartRadio app. And TikTok trending is basically a radio station that plays a lot of the songs that are trending on TikTok, as you would gather by the name. And so I did that just before I came on to talk to you, William, and I took a screenshot of the top songs that they had just played, because they have a list of songs they've just played on the station. And it was tracks like Katy Perry, Wide Awake, Harry Styles, As It Was, Central C, Entrepreneur, Coldplay, Clocks. Now, that's a 2002 song, but that is currently trending. You've got the song Music Sounds Better With You by Stardust, which came out in 1998.
Wow.
But it's currently trending. So this can really open up your mind just to find out what students are listening to. But not everyone is going to be into pop music. Right. So I have a cousin who he's a kid, he's young, but he's really into Elvis. So, but, something like TikTok trending is a good place to start. And asking your students what they're listening to is also a good place to start.
Well, it connects to the Unleashed Learning system, because what we teach and the science connects to that is building a bridge between who the students are and the content. It literally is the neuroscience, the schema. And when it comes to music and resources, what you're saying is talk to them and listen to what they're talking about. And I remember this a long time ago, I'm dating myself, but there was a student who wasn't very engaged in class. But one day she told me what the music she loved was. And I popped, now this is CDs, this is a long time ago, but I popped it in. We were like best friends for the rest of the semester because she felt connected to it. It wasn't the music I liked, but she knew I was sending this message. I'll never forget that. So ask them. Okay, I could just.
Absolutely. And it does bring that connection, it takes away that disconnect.
See why I have you, why I wanted to interview you? I was like, I saw you and I was listening to you. I'm like, I have got to interview her. So Thank you for being here. Okay, so here you address this in it, but the next question I've got is, classrooms are really diverse spaces, races, genders, sexual orientations, nationalities, languages. So how do we, as a collective, if I'm a teacher and it's really diverse backgrounds, how am I making some decisions about the kinds of music I should choose if there's so many different people in that room?
So I'm going to quote the pop icon, Desiree. So she has a song called You Gotta Be. And in that song, and this isn't the first time I've quoted Desiree Williams, in that song, she says, read the books your father read. So I'm going to switch that quote around and say to teachers, listen to the music your students are listening to. Why? How else are you going to connect with them on that level? So seek first to be understood, and to seek first to understand, then be understood. We've all heard that saying, right? So I reckon do that before you introduce tracks that you might enjoy, and that they'll be more inclined to listen to those tracks in that way if you do it round that way. So you could also introduce to them, and this would be a lot of fun, William. So versions of songs they know and love that were sampled. So songs that were either have samples or interpolations, and these are quite often older songs that are now around, and the students might be listening to the new version of a particular song, like Luke Combs' Fast Car versus Tracy Chapman's Fast Car.
That was my generation.
Well, Luke Combs has put that song on the charts again. It's now a hit again. They might have heard the new version but not be familiar with the old version. So you could play a bit of a game with it. There are playlists on Spotify and on YouTube and Apple Music where you can find playlists like rap songs and their samples. So, for example, Big Poppa, most people have heard that song by the Notorious B.I.G. That's sampled Between the Sheets by the Isley Brothers. So you could play those songs back to back. You could play Warren G and Nate Dogg's Regulate, and then play I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald.
I wish we had
it's
it playing.
Just a fun game.
I want to have it on while we're talking. I want to be rocking out. It makes me think when you're saying it, because in the day, for me, I would be driving the stores, finding CDs and then trying to put them on. And now on our phones. So once we find these playlists, we can use them over and over again. It's just in the beginning, it takes some time to build them the way you're describing it, right? So take the old songs that have been used again for the new times, like Fast Car with Tracy Chapman. Well, it was Tracy Chapman in my day.
Yes. Well, somebody has already done the work for you, most likely, William, because if you go to any of these platforms, you will find these playlists have already been put together by different people. So you've got different examples of exactly what I'm talking about. You can do it yourself as well, but the work has already been done for you.
And the teachers and leaders are going, thank you. Thank God. Okay, so I got a couple other questions for you. You've kind of alluded to the next question in some ways, but teachers are busy people. So initially they're like, I don't have time to be keeping up with this or finding music. Are there some go-to places that, again, I was from the States. I used to drive on Saturday to Target stores, and I would go because that's where you could find music, and I would be going through. Today it's on our phones. Or where are some places for those playlists that you recommend that maybe it's easier for us to find?
A very wise person once told me that Google is an amazing tool. So I literally Googled, what do young people listen to these days? Or what do teenagers listen to these days? And up popped a whole heap of stuff. There was an article right at the top about what teens are listening to in 2023. It was published in September last year. So it was people like Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, but also people you may have not heard of, like Conan Gray and Sabrina Carpenter. But they're huge amongst the teens. You know, the next entry was a Reddit, you know, post where someone had asked that very question: what are teenagers listening to these days? And people were answering it. People from the public were answering this question. You know, you've got YouTube playlists that actually have names like Teen Party Music 2024. So research. And how do you do that research? Best place to start is Google.
But you know, you're asking, what I hear you saying is these searches like that. And what it makes me think of is once I got my playlist on my phone, I could be using this stuff. So it just took some time initially to find some of it. I'm just thinking myself as an educator. The other thing I'm thinking about is some of the music young people were listening to when I was teaching high school, I couldn't relate to at all, but I learned about students. Like, music helped me connect to them in the most powerful ways. Okay.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And although you might not have that connection with those tracks yourself, but like you said, you will learn a lot about your students, and that in itself is so rewarding.
Well, some of them would hate me because I would fall in love with a song and then they go, Dejan, if you love that song, I can't love it anymore. But it bonded us. So I'm like, I love that song. And Dejan, you can't sing that with us. And I go, but it's a great song. But it created that bond, you know, it really created that bond. Okay, Manu, let me ask you this question. If you were a student today and you walked into a classroom, what would you want to be hearing that would inspire you or want to walk into the room? That's a big question, I know, but let's throw it out there.
So personally, if it was me, I would want to hear Afro beats. Why would I want to hear Afro beats? Because I just love Afrobeats music. It's what I'm listening to at the moment. It's what a lot of people are listening to at the moment. So by 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be African. Wow. So it's a very young continent, and the African population is exploding. Not only that, but you can see it already in our fashion, in the music we listen to, in the food we eat, you know, even in like the Ethiopian coffee beans that you might find in your coffee at the coffee shop in the morning. You know, like Africa is taking off at the moment. And so Afrobeats, I would want to hear artists like Wizkid. He's my favorite artist at the moment. And Burna Boy, Thames, Davido, Stonebwoy, Shatta Wale. I would want to hear songs like African Bad Girl. Oh, that's not saying anything. The Mood, Mona Lisa, you know, some Amapiano in there. That would make me happy, personally, just saying.
It also, you know, we talk about this idea of lifting the weights. You won't know that because you haven't worked with us, but part of it is asking students to bring in the songs that they love. You know, if they have the resources to do that, and not to spend money, but giving the list, telling us what they love, putting on the board and collecting the bank. So some of the music that you shared that maybe we're not familiar with, you're bringing that in, and we start putting that in the playlist as people walk in. It's a great way to create a sense of belonging for all of us.
And music is so accessible these days. I mean, you don't have to pay for it necessarily. I mean, YouTube is free. You know, they make money off ads and stuff like that. So there are lots of ways to get the music, so to speak.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've got some rapid fire questions. I know when I sent them to you, they got all scattered, so we got the right. So we're like really quick ones, okay? So can you tell us the name of a favorite teacher?
Ms. Clark. Do you want to know why?
Yes, I want to know why.
Okay, so Ms. Clark was a teacher of mine in primary school. She got us to make our own children's books. So Hip Hop and Hymns was my debut book, but really the children's book I made in Ms. Clark's class was the first book I actually ever wrote. and I cut out material to clothe the characters in my book, came up with a story and everything. It was exciting. I loved it. And Ms. Clark, you're a legend for getting us to do that.
And it stuck because you were lifting the weights from an Unleashed Learning perspective. You were actually doing it. So how about, which it might be this person, but person who's most impacted your learning journey?
Now, the funny thing about this is I do not remember her name, but I remember what she said to me. So it's a teacher in the first, or I would have been in the first or second grade. She planted the seed in my mind that I could be a journalist. When she did that, I decided, that's what I wanted to do. And I had been working towards it ever since. And hey, I'm a journalist.
You would just remind us the power of who the teacher is, what that one teacher can do. I just got chills down my spine from this. Okay, last one is, you've written a book, you speak lots of places, you're a journalist. I think you've got the coolest job I know, besides being an educator. When you think of all the work you're doing, what is one idea, maybe it's in your book, that you're really trying to get to stick for people? If you could boil it down to like you really want it to stick, what do you think it would be?
Well, I actually wrote my book because I wanted to change the world. And how do I change the world? For me, personally, I'm a writer. So the only way for me to change the world is through my words. So if there's one thing that I would want to stick is read hip hop and hymns. There's a lot of passion and a lot of really important lessons in that book. And I think as an educator, this is a book you should read because your students are probably going to read it. And you may want to connect with them in that way because it's such an important story. And I think it's one that teachers really should get on board with.
Well, we will publicize it for sure. I'll be part of when it goes out. Can I just say on behalf of me and the team, thank you so much for your time, your enthusiasm. You remind me of the power of music, of our classrooms, and what it takes to really make learning stick. So thank you, my friend.
Such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, William.
Rock and roll. We'll speak to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Cheers. Okay, was she not amazing? Be honest here. She was amazing. So we now have a question for you. We hope that inspired you about using music. And our question is this: how do you use music in your classroom? So we're going to invite you to jump over the comment section of our site and join the conversation. While you're there, grab your free ebook or send it to somebody and help a good school become a great school. And as always, thank you for the work you do for our world. We're cheering you on.